Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Spellman. I have the privilege of being the president of the World Affairs Council, and I'd like to welcome everybody here today. We're very pleased to be partnering with the Polish Center of Discovery and Learning to present this afternoon's program. As always, we give a special thanks to NAA Plotkin, which allows us to use this wonderful facility here. Thank you to board member Jeremy Cole and Jeff Krasner, who are recording today's event. At the table, there is registration information about the World Affairs Council and the Polish Center, including membership forms. This is one of our membership forms, and details for upcoming events. The World Affairs Council has an Instant Issues event coming up April 29th. From our former board member, Kavita Khoury, who is a professor and department chair up at Mount Holyoke College, on emerging powers and U.S. foreign policy implications for global governance. And I hope you can attend. That'll be at noon on the 29th. At this point, rather than giving my usual 2 to 3 hour introductory speech, I'm going to hand things over to Olin Bielski, Director of Business Development at the Polish Center, who will take over from here. Sir.
Thank you, Steve, for your very kind words of introduction. I'd like to recognize one particular person in our audience today, Joanne Gruskus, the chairman of the board of the Polish Center of Discovery and Learning. Professor Gideon Warner from Quinnipiac University reached out to me 3 weeks ago and says, hey, I got a great opportunity. I've got Professor Wiktor Askanas from Poland that's going to be here, and I wonder if you might be able to find some time. So I reached out to Sid, and she graciously accepted my offer, and that's what brings us here today. So I'd like to introduce our good friend and board member, Gideon Warner, to make the next introduction. Gideon?
We're just going to be passing along, with the introduction.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So I guess it's up to me to have a 2-hour speech, right, Cynthia?
No.
2 hours? No? Okay, I won't. 3 hours, good. Once again, good afternoon. Dzień dobry, for those that speak Polish. It is my great pleasure to introduce today our guest speaker, a very dear friend and colleague. I hope I can say friend, colleague. We go way back working together or in the same environment. Professor Wiktor Askanas is a professor emeritus of the University of New Brunswick, Canada. It's not that 51st state yet, but distinguished expert in strategic management, governance, and international business. He's also a member of the Canadian Competition Tribunal, correct? Oh, that was. And currently, Wiktor is living in Poland for over the last 10 years. Is also a professor emeritus at Kosmicki Academy, a premier private business school in Warsaw, Poland. We call it Polish Harvard. As any good business educator, Professor Askanas is also has held numerous leadership positions and roles in academia, government, and corporate boards. Sits on corporate boards. He has been honored multiple times by the Polish government for his contribution and impact on Polish education and society. Please welcome Professor Wiktor Askanas. Wiktor?
I don't need this.
You don't need it?
No.
I'm going to be doing the Q&A. So.
All right.
Good afternoon. One of the Polish great poet defined immigrant as a person who've lost everything except accent. So just go with me, okay, on this one. Yes, I spent almost 30 years in Canada, being kicked out of Poland under the martial law, and then returned to Poland because, as usual, there was a lady, and we've decided that it's much better for us. She was at the time deputy mayor of Warsaw, so it was better for her to hold her position than me try to spread ignorance at University of New Brunswick. I've accepted this challenge because it is a challenge, especially today, when one of the major issues is that we are living in complete and unbelievable instability. to say that this is unstable environment is to say nothing. I prepared this speech about a week ago, and today most of these things are completely irrelevant. I guess things happen in the speed of light. So one of our reasons that this stability is so undermined lies in those 5 different and interconnected areas. The politics and the history, when you look into history of politics, supposed to teach us many lessons, and it seems to me that we are really very bad learners. We haven't really learned, especially in Europe. We forget about the fact that, especially in Poland, and Mr. Wałęsa was saying the other day, funny thing by saying Poland, you know what it is? It's the country of military tourism. So they usually was from the east to west, from north to south, and any war always engaged Poland. So because of this, one would think that we will have in policy, in international position, that will hold off some of those experience that we encounter, especially in the last 100 years. So the history on one hand, but the history goes even further. You know, there is something that was called an Egyptian plague, which means that your actions can create counteractions, and at the end of the day, you have the collapse of Roman Empire. And it started up with a very small and insignificant duties that was imposed on the Roman ships coming to Alexandria. So take it from this history, and then we will going to talk about this a little bit more to expand on this one. Because the second thing is economy. And this is, here we have another problem, because it became an empty shell. Intellectually, we are still in 19th century. When we are talking about economy, we are still talking about the reality that really doesn't exist. And in many instances, we have no tools to respond to the challenges that are generated in front of us. So we have the theory of economy and macroeconomy and microeconomy and everything else. But if you will try to use any of those, you will probably end up bankrupt very quickly. So this is something that I will talk a little bit more, especially in the context of Poland and the European Union. Then we have environment. And I have the question, which I guess we can as well discuss, to which extent the issue of environment is a myth and to which extent is reality. The one thing is sure, that we are nobody in front of environment. In the last, 6 days, you have a major earthquake, you have a flooding in the middle of United States, which we have no way to respond to. We had a huge flooding in Europe last fall. We have a couple of volcanoes that goes off. So in front of the real force of environment, we as the humans are really like a little ant. We maybe are thinking that we have an impact, but in fact, we have to live within the compound of what this environment is allowing us to do. And then we have a technology. And the technology, sometimes one of my colleagues was saying that it's changing so quickly that we are really acting like a monkey with the Caesar. We have those tools, but we are not quite sure at the end of the day what those tools are going to lead us to. It's almost like knowing, as you know, the it's a Russian opera, that if you know only the half of the spell, which is how to start, and you don't know how to end, this is what is happening with technology today. So I will address this a little bit more as well later. And then we have demography. And the question in the demographic environment is that it's out of control. Now, on one hand, we are saying that there's too many of us. On the other hand, the people are saying it's too few. And the question is really, from the economic and growth and society growth, what is the level that is in the optimum the heirs can still allow us to maintain? So those are the five, in my view, the five major sources of instability. So let's go on a little bit about each of this and go a little bit further to see what is the context. The first one is the question about elections and the consequences of choices. Well, US is not the only country that is really challenged with the result of election. We have exactly the same thing in Germany, when you have a huge right-wing party that is looking to take over power, almost the right wing to the point that we can call them fascists. We have France, where the right-wing populist party, well, is trying as well to build a presence very strongly. Well, we will see what is going to happen with the court, the sentence that is preventing some of these political movements. We have Romania, we have Balkans, and now we have Poland. We have election in about a month's time, and believe it or not, two of the leading candidate is on the Democratic front. Two others behind him are the right-wing populists, radical candidates, and the government of today has a very small parliament advantage. It's a very small majority. And the fight now really is about who is going to be a president of Poland. And if by any chance one of those right-wing person will win election, then we have a complete stalemate. And then we have a crisis in the middle of European community, not only political, but as well economic. And we have to remember as well that Poland is today on the border, the longest border. Well, Finland is probably longer, but nobody's living there, with Belarus and Ukraine. So when you look into geography, we are really a front country. We are almost in the middle of the war. And from Kiev to Warsaw is 600 kilometers. So it's one little rocket, and we have a major problem. So consequences of elections that are going to be held now in France, Italy, Poland, Romania, and Croatia, Austria, everything it's boiling. I mean, Europe is not a very peaceful, safe place today, and the consequences could be incredible. On the other hand, the consequence of election in US has created a situation when Europe is united. That suddenly, despite the effort of US government to divide us, we've united. The same with Ukraine. The Russians attacked them thinking that they are going to turn Ukrainian into their friends. And what they've accomplished is that they have a nation that actually hates them and is going to defend itself any possible way. So even if the Russians will win, we are going to have a partisan, we're going to have the internal war. They are not going to control Ukraine one way or the other. This is something, it's a little bit scary. So we've entered a time of divided societies. And divided society is a little bit dangerous as well, because it goes so deep that you cannot even talk to your own family if you have a different political views. Now we are, coming to Easter. Usually it was very family-oriented holiday in Poland, and people are afraid to gather together. Well, it's scary, because we are not discussing issues, we are arguing about issues. And when you are arguing, then you have to win argument. When you are discussing, you're approaching life with expectations that maybe my opponent is right. Maybe not in 100%, but at least I will give him a chance to explain the reasons of thinking this or that way. It cannot be imposed on me. So in this sort of divided society, you're going to always have 49 to 51, where liberal democracy was trying to teach us that the majority in the government are there to protect the rights of minority. It is not only to govern. And I guess this knowledge somehow, somewhere disappeared. And then we have another things in this politics, that we are creating all sorts of empty promises. So it is incredible when you are listening to those candidates for the Polish presidency, what they are trying to offer constituency. Almost 80% of things that they're offering is not in the preview of their power. They cannot do this, okay? But despite this, they cannot do it, they still are promising. They're going to build houses, they're going to build cars, they're going to do all kinds of things. This is this kind of populist solution, which is a simple solution to very complex issues. And the language and the things that they are using to generate the positive response is starting to be at the verge of vulgar. It's accusing, you can lie, you can tell anything you want, and there is absolutely no punishment for this. So where are the values? Poland was always historically this deeply Catholic, open society where the ideas of a pope would be a leading measure of behavior, leading measure of what is decent or indecent, And unfortunately, we have a crisis. We have a crisis where we are talking one thing and doing the other. So those values are as well being reflected in the way you conduct your business. The handshake doesn't mean anything anymore. The promise could be broken. This is what I have to deal with as the judge in this Canadian Competition Tribunal, is that most of advertisement is basically lying. It's misleading. It's not giving you the right information about the product or service. So maybe we have a civilization in crisis. Maybe we are now living in the time where the Rome is collapsing. We have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. So that's the reason why the politics is bringing this instability to our environment. Economy. Well, we haven't recovered from COVID. The COVID has created the inclusions, it's closing. It created as well the breakup in communication. The people are starting to live in front of the screen rather in a social context. Especially this relates to these younger generations. They have this difficult to adjust to this post-COVID world when you have to return to reality. You cannot hide behind the screen. Unfortunately, today, I ran into the message from the Polish healthcare authorities that the new COVID virus is on the way. Scary. The second thing about the economy today is that we are living in a debt-driven environment. Everybody owns everybody else, and nobody knows who owns whom and how much. And this not only is about us as individuals, but it is as well between countries, between institutions. I've asked the Minister of Finance of Poland the other day, whom we own as a Poland, because we have a negative deficit of enormous proportions. It's now running about 40% of GDP. And I said, could you tell me which country owns, whom we own? And he said, well, I don't know. I say, you don't know or you don't want to tell me? Here we have a little bit of funny argument. I presume that about 60% of Polish debt is in the Chinese hands. By average, probably this is the same with every other countries in Europe, except Germany, because for the last 30 years, the Germans were running their economy on a tight belt. They were very, very responsible with regard to how the government was allowed to borrow money. So they are probably at the best situation in these terms. But on the other hand, they have recession. So now, figure it out. So that driven, could we get out of this? I don't know, because their numbers are so staggering that probably we'll never get out of this. In the history, and if you would like to use this learning from the history, the debt was wiped up by the war. The First World War, the Second World War, this was just allowing everybody to start from scratch. No, I don't want to have exactly the same solution to the situation that we have now. Then we have a problem with GDP. It became like a food in a student cafeteria. Easy to produce, difficult to destroy. What I mean by this is that we are using this in an environment which is different. GDP is not telling us anything about the state of economy, about the state of society. We have to come out with a completely different measure of our economic and political strengths. And we have to get rid of all those theories. So it's time to change. In the economy, we have everywhere energy crisis. And here, going to this 51st state, I don't know if anybody understands that 30% of US energy is coming from Canada. And the Canadian, they have the switch, because they have a switch in Quebec and they have a switch in Ontario. So I wouldn't go anywhere closer to have a plus on top. Somebody told me that if Canada became a 51st state, we will have, by virtue of number of citizens, additional 50 seats in Congress, which means that we Canadians will start to run US because we will have majority. Okay? So somebody has to figure it out as well. The problem with energy crisis relates as well to this whole idea of environment. We were so late in switching from coal, especially in Poland, to the renewable energy. The same was happening in Germany. The same was happening in south of Europe. It was not happening in France, because France basically is generating 80% with the nuclear power, and technologically are the most advanced in this particular. So they are fueling the energy in Europe. But it takes time to switch and change. You know, you're not going to build a nuclear plant. It takes about 12 years to have one. Even if you start to use the solar power, it's going to take time because the grid are not ready. It's not only that, it's easy to create source of energy. It's very difficult to move energy from one place to another. In this area, we are technologically really behind, and we don't know how. This is why, to some extent, electric car will have a problem. Because, question will be how much energy we are losing by trying to bring this energy to those electric cars that you have to somehow, those batteries supposed to be loaded. And what is the level of this negative flow, so to speak. And then in economy today, we are going to have a crisis, and this is what Poland is now being faced with in supply chain. Probably 67% of all containers physically are owned by China. So everything that is being moved, you have to use technology that Chinese is providing you with. The ships, no. No, half of the fleet is Greek or Poles, Swedish, a little bit of Dutch, but on those ships, everything that is there are really Chinese. They almost own it. So it's a multifaceted, multi-level game. We already see this from the past, from the COVID, how difficult it was to rebuild some supply chain, which was broken then. And I have this fresh data from Poland. It's about 6,500 jobs on stake because the parts needed to manufacture whatever goods they're manufacturing is now being lost. So the next step, I understand from today's news that China didn't respond favorably to demand from US about the duties. So I guess we will have another issue with the supply chain. And we have to realize that it's going to disturb everything that is today being manufactured one way or the other. Demand versus supply. It's a phenomenon in which we have as well, this is exactly the same thing in Poland. The demand is in different place, usually in a place which cannot afford to buy produce, and supply is in a different place. So in Poland, for example, the eastern part of Poland is where demand is, but the earnings of this part of the society is so low that they cannot afford to buy some of those goods, because it used to be a very poor part of Poland. Then you have a western part, closer to German border, where manufacturing sector is very strong, but they are not buying because they already have what they need was. So you have this conflict between demand and supply, the resources and offerings, and now when you go to the world map, it's even worse because demand is in Africa, but they cannot afford. Except that, immediately they are starting to sell their resources in order to provide themselves with enough capacity to purchase. So this could lead to conflicting consequences between nations and between within the societies as well, when you have this difference in economic power. You have the middle class is disappearing, and the middle class is the force of demand. And if you don't have a middle class, then suddenly it's a gap. So this, the small group which can afford is already not showing any interest in purchasing, and then those at the bottom of economic topo cannot afford the supply, running into debt, running into even more crisis. And now we have as well in economy what we saw, the collapse of international legal arrangements. Europe was building up this united economy, and we were quite successful. Forget about the duties were not there, the border was open, the people were moving, the labor was moving, the capital was moving. So we were able to build this stability of European community. And now, if you undermine these absolute legal arrangements, then the question is, how we are going to conduct our trade exchanges and duties are the taxes which not supposed to be used, because it's like when you impose the duty, you're basically taxing somebody else. And the consequence of this are going to be paid by your own citizens. So now you disadvantage me, but you never produce any positive results. And an idea that if I am going to lock myself in a protecting environment because I would like to have and develop manufacturing capacities and become self-sufficient, okay, maybe in 10 years, if you can wait so long. I guess we are older generation here. I don't think that we're going to see this happening. But for sure, you're going to create less effective economy, less competitive economy. And again, when you go to the history, when the Berlin Wall collapsed and Poland moved from under the Russian influence into this free, competitive economy, well, the improvement of the economic life in Poland was dramatic. 15 years ago, when I was kicked out of the country, there was a completely different country than the one I returned to, both from the social, economic, and service and everything else. I don't know that simplicity is not working. One thing that is working, if you really would like to create a positive outcome from international trade, is negotiating caps, which is, this is how much I will allow you to bring, and this is how much you allow me to bring on the zero basis. An economic game in this context is not the zero-sum game. This is not that if somebody is winning, somebody has to lose. It's different. It's a non-zero-sum game, and we can gain on both sides if we want, if we like, if we're going to talk about it. So now that's quotes from the last day about the tariffs. And I don't know if you can see it, but those are the quotes from Ursula von der Leyen about the consequences will be dire. The China is saying that it's not going to accept this. The Canadian Prime Minister, this is essential act with purpose and with force. Melody was again, okay, by saying, and she's on the way to discuss those things with Trump. And so Minister of Ireland, Australian president, South Korea, Japan, you have 50 countries that are saying, don't do this because it's not a good thing, and it's not going to produce proper results. Environment. Well, somebody would like to say that that this is myth, but $150 million were spent now to repair the flooding in Czech Republic and Poland that happened in September. Cities were destroyed. Communities were destroyed. This is the force. We have the warmest February on record. We have the rainfall that in 48 hours would equal to a 4 weeks years before. So we can say that it's a myth. We can say that this is not humans' fault, but we have to deal with it. We are going to have more and more issues. We're going to figure it out how we are going to build to protect ourselves from these extreme shifts and changes. And I can tell you, personally, it's awful. When I was flying here, there was, in Celsius, 22 in New York. And today is, what, +3? My body is not taking this easy. And now talk about resources. Quickly. It's a shift. Those type of resources that we were needed 5 years ago are now in an oversupply, and resources that we need now are in a very short supply. Well, this is the whole speech about Greenland. This is the whole idea about Ukraine. This is the whole things about Congo. This is the whole thing about the fact that now suddenly Serbia has one of the biggest rare metal deposits. But the citizens of Serbia are saying, don't touch it. we don't want you to destroy our environment by digging this. And, well, you know that major investors in Syria are China. They almost own towns. So those resource crises is starting to be a reason for countries to aggressively defend or attack. And these resources are needed because we have a technology change. We have such a huge and speedy dynamics that I don't know that we can adjust to it. Look, in '68, my first job was a system analyst and COBOL programmer in a computer that was as big as this room, holding, 48 kilo of memory. Okay? That was the beginning of my intellectual career. And today, what I have, this, everything else, AI. I know it's maybe a great tool. But when we started internet many, many years ago, we were hoping for good as well. We were thinking that we are giving a scientist and intellectuals a tool to communicate, to develop, to grow, and what we have now is the pornography. In most cases, at least is full of this, and hatred. Now, I would like to believe that this artificial intelligence will give us new tools, but my question is, and who developed those algorithms? Where they were coming from? Who is the author? And could this author explain to me how this algorithm is going to work? Because if Mr. Musk is behind this, then I don't want artificial intelligence created by non-intelligent person. So I would like to see that there is some legal arrangements or society that will control what is happening. My good friend, who is the chief medical officer at the Institute of Health, the other day, he's using artificial intelligence for his research, just collecting data, it's easier, and so on. He said to me the other day, he said, you know what? This thing is lazy and it's lying. This is his response to what is happening. We have robotics, which is, we are changing dynamics of the labor force. Now in Poland, we have a discussion of how to tax robotics. Because when the human being is working and is creating value added, we are going back to Marx, we know that we can tax this value added. Now, if I replace the human with robotic, that I am losing this added value. So we need to figure out how to equalize. You don't want me to work? Fine. You're going to have robotics? Fine. But you have to pay for the healthcare. You have to pay for social services. You have to tax the fact that somebody is replacing me as the potential value-added source. Now we have medicine. It's running out of money everywhere in the world. And the question is, what is going on here? Why we have in economy a sector that is taxing everybody rather than providing services for which there is no profit, but it's only cost recovery? Why we have the situation when in today's market, I looked at them in the morning, Medicare was going up. All the companies that are providing medical services were the first one on the stock exchange that went up. by 4-6% today in the morning. What is the story here? So somebody is just, because she's providing the service, is giving me additional tax. Something has to change. We are spending a hell of a lot of money in the military. Poland is spending now 5% of GDP on building up military. We are basically wasting money. I know that you have to create the security and safety and everything, but 5 years from now, all this equipment that we produce is not going to be useful for anything. So it's just the money that is being thrown into the garbage. And don't tell me that this military development is going to create the economy. It's not going to do this. So after 70 years of peaceful Europe, we now have a Europe that is starting to buy more and more military equipment. And we are not going to buy it from US. That's for sure. We are building now our own European capacity. Volkswagen is turning from the car manufacturer to the military equipment manufacturer because you cannot buy guns and ammunition from somebody that is not trustworthy. Because you don't know tomorrow if they will not tell us, well, you have our jet, but I'm not going to give you any parts. Or if you want those parts, that you have to buy the whole factory or whatever. So, so here we have a huge expense, wasteful from the economic point of view. Every day of Ukrainian war can build a hospital. Every 2 days of Ukrainian war can provide 4 great education to every kids on earth. So this is how wasteful the whole thing is. Now, we were talking about too many or too little. I guess that again, we have probably too many in one place, too little in a different place. We have a huge demographic problem because we are going to have a migration. It doesn't matter, Africa is moving. Today, I guess it's about 10 million people on move, from the places where there's shortage of food to the places where they think they can feed the family. And you can stop them, 10 million, how? You cannot build a wall. Again, intellectually, we need to find. Poland has a problem as well because we have about 1.5 million Ukrainian ladies that escaped the war. So suddenly this was unbalanced with regard to immigration equilibrium. They were coming with the small kids. So there is a pressure on kindergarten, schools, and so on. And you know what's happening, that at the beginning, everybody was welcoming them with an open arms. 3 years later, it builds resentment. Why we are keeping 1.5 million people, and despite the fact that they are working, but the misleading and the propaganda, especially coming from Russia, is trying to undermine the position within our own society. We are going to be confronted with the aging population, and the pension consequences are unbelievable. I've told yesterday that the 4 days of downfall on the stock exchange will require now for the pension funds about 7 years to rebuild. Because the valuations of those pension funds were completely undermined, and it's a question of liquidity. So with the stock going down, your assets are not liquid. Nobody's buying, everybody's selling. And you need those liquidity to pay the pensioners whatever your obligations are. So we have as well in Canada, the target for 2025 was 62% replacement. So that 62% of your last salary will be paid into you in a pension. Exactly, we have 42, not 62. So the wealth of our aging population is declining. So going slowly to the end. Pessimistically, we are moving to the Orwell world, when everybody is fighting everybody. As you remember in Orwell, we have those three countries, and they were in the war. And always, one day, one country was winning, the other country was winning. And we, in Orwell world, we have as well incredible policing. So it's an autocratic environment where autocrats are running the world. So this is a pessimistic view. Optimistic view is that we have a period of instability, but we are good enough intellectually to create a new order which will please all of us, and we will still live in peace. As far as investment in Poland, quickly to finish, if somebody is looking for places to go with money, and there is a net outflow from US, so please think about it. IT in Poland is very strong. We have at least 4 companies. They're looking for, and we have as well AI leading institution. So it's open, it's attractive, and it's well protected. Poland is rebuilding the military sector, which is producing our own ammunition, our own armament, and there is this private-public offering when the public can go and join state in having shares of those, if you ethically would like to be part of this type of the industry. I am on the board of directors of the pension fund in Poland, and we've decided the other day that we will not, as the pension fund, invest in anything that has to do with the military. Economically, probably is wrong, but ethically, we feel good. Energy sector obviously is looking for not only for investment, but is looking as well for people that understand how to run energy sector. The same is with Ukraine. They have to rebuild the whole sector. So this will be a huge demand for specialists in this area. There is a problem with social services because as aging society, we will need more and more social services. I, for one, with my wife, we moved to the senior compound. We sold our house and decided to live in a more protective environment where we have those social services. So, the idea that somebody will help and somebody will, not our kids. We don't want to tax our kids. And they are all over the world anyway, so how they can help us when they are not around. So this is why the need for those social services will be. This is one of the part in Poland where the Ukrainian, this lady that came, they are now a huge part of the delivery of the social services. We'll see how this is going to do. And the next and the last one is education. Education as the sector of economy requires investment, and this is the huge opportunity, not only in Poland, but the whole European Union is looking for the good educators. So that's the story for today. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Who has a question?
Hi, thank you for your comments. I wonder if you could just catch me up, and maybe the others, they may know. But when you look at the autocratic tendencies in Europe, Poland really had a big autocratic problem at least up until the more recent years. And I probably didn't keep up with it well enough to see the transition, but that's not a big issue now? Or is it a big issue now? Has the authority of the authoritarians diminished?
The problem that we have, let's put it this way, in England, opposition is called Her Majesty Loyal Opposition. There is loyalty to the Majesty. In Poland, unfortunately, the former autocratic group that was running country for 8 years don't want to be a loyal opposition. So there is this risk that if this group will return to power, in 2 years we have election and now we have a presidential election, that this autocratic movement will return. So there is a risk. The government of today is very democratic, but the problem that they have is that in order to get rid of law and order, as they call themselves, you have too many united forces which are from right to left. So you have a social democrats that are trying to be together with the former Communist Party, basically. So in a coalition like this, it's very hard to manage. But, and as I said, I mean, if one of those that are now in polls, second and third, both of those guys are very autocratic in their own minds. So yes, there is a risk. Obviously, the right-wing party, the one that would like to hold with the strong hand society, is now running about 17% of populist votes. So now you have AfD in Germany, and they obviously in European Parliament are working together. You have Maloney in Italy. In Austria, you have a very right-wing party that they block them from taking power. I'm not even mentioning of what Hungary is doing. So you have this tendency in Europe to create this autocratic regimes as the response to perceived failure of democracy. The liberal democracy is not working anymore. That is giving too much freedom, that creates chaos, and then there is this group of people that will say, I mean, this group, 17% across, that will say we need to have a law and order. And we need a strong person to bring law and order. Polish history is full of the autocratic leadership, unfortunately. So when, this is something, when in crisis, you are turning to something that didn't work, but you are familiar with. So this is, yes, there is a risk, yes.
Maybe another question. This might not be a question, but a follow-up to what you said. I think that the race of the autocratic governments are not only in Poland, but worldwide. I mean, when you look at the Latin America, you have Brazil, populist, you have Argentina recently. You look in Southeast Asia, of course, you have China, you have Russia, you have Turkey. So it's a probably more of a global phenomenon than just European, where there's a backlash against the liberal democracy. But what kind of backlash is in other parts that do not have a liberal democracy? Because there is obviously interest in it. I mean, it seems like the electorates all over the world are easily, buying the argumentation of the autocratic governments and the populist views, and then they just, voting them in. I mean, there are no military coups like, Pinochet in Chile in the 70s, or I'm sorry, Allende or Pinochet, whatever, later, So there is certainly some kind of appeal to the autocratic strong men, and not to mention the United States. Sorry about that.
Well, so what you are saying is the experiment with democracy failed? That the human beings across the societies are more open to the stratifications of power, and we are all looking for a strong man to organize our life, and we don't want to participate in it. Probably, maybe, I don't know.
Some people will say that democracy ended with a Greek polis, city-state, because it's when we talk about the United States as the cradle of democracy, let's be honest about it. Who had the right to vote? Women, 1920s, right? Black people, 3/5 of the vote. Foreigners, 0. Yeah, the white male Protestant had that. Foreigners and other religions didn't have a right to vote. So, in that sense, we have a developed version of democracy, and then they're not bad versions. I'm not saying that. It's just that maybe there is a need for the adjusting the social democratic and the market economy that we have now, and maybe we need a serious disruption. And sometimes the disruption comes from the unexpected direction, maybe to fix it. And then I share your view that you said 2 options, one Orwell and one optimistic one. Maybe, hopefully, there is something positive that maybe come from that, in the other parts. All right?
What can I answer? I can answer the only way, from 1968, I am fighting with oppressive governments and systems, and I am going to do it, as long as I am, on 2 feet and close to 80, but maybe, another few years. And no, I don't think that the human character is leading us toward the accepting the power head. Or maybe, we failed as educators because we didn't educate society sufficiently enough to allow people to understand what reality is. And if we still have a situation when sociology is telling us that average person listening to news on TV can actually capture about 40% and understand less than 20 of the messages being, transfers to the media, well, then it's our fault. Okay, we did something wrong, and maybe this is going to create a crisis, and I hope I will die before.
So mine is more toward the gentleman in the front row. You'd have to be able to start listing off nations led under autocracies that have lasted for long periods of time, because they don't. They collapse in some way. So I don't know that it's a viable alternative. It may be where societies are headed, but I don't think of them as a viable alternative, and I don't have much to add to what you just said.
Thank you.
Sure. On the issue of tariffs, the United States has tariffs on products coming into our country, which are far higher than what we take from the other countries. There's a principle of equity, and why shouldn't we be treated equally? Our country with other countries, Poland included. I love Poland, that's why I'm here. I don't know what their position is on tariffs. I'd like to know if you know. I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
So, please.
Okay. I have a very simple answer, really. That tariffs were created to equalize dumping. So it was created to make sure that nobody is selling below the cost of manufacturing. Now, in each and every country today, you have a completely different cost of manufacturing. And if the level of life in China is much lower than here, and they, in this value-added chain, were able to generate product cheaper and sell it to me, and I cannot prove that they were dumping, that they were selling something below the cost, that the only tariff I can put is what the equalized tax, I would say, will handle. And usually it was about 10%, which is to generate revenue for me as the state, because this was just, the purpose of it will be not to equalize, because you're producing cheaper than you are allowed to sell cheaper. But I, as a country, have to run my border, my duty, my supply. So I need to take a little bit of it so I can finance everything that I need to arrange for the fact that international trade is taking place. So those are the rational taxes. And then it's no the differentiation. And if you are now putting much higher taxes because you are saying, I am producing less effectively, my cost of manufacturing are higher. So now I am going to force you to pay for the fact that I am not efficient. So this is where you have the issue. Poland, obviously, is reacting to those taxes, sending the message as well to U.S. government by saying, why are you punishing us? We have nothing to do with it. We're manufacturing parts to the cars, and this is the cost of manufacturing those parts. We are already paying duties because in order to manufacture those parts, we have to bring steel, we have to bring aluminum, and this is the cost of manufacturing. And I am selling this to you with the rational price. So why suddenly I have to pay 25% when in fact this is the almost assuming that I am lying, that I am dumping, that I am doing something that is, from the legal point of view, wrong. So that's the two different ways of looking at this whole tax system, because it's the taxing system. Now, because China was manufacturing things cheaper, what we've done, we moved our manufacturing facilities to China. And now we are penalizing China for the fact that we move our manufacturing to them. So where is the logic? Nobody was asking American companies to go and create a strong manufacturing sector in China. Nobody was preventing American automobile industry not to sell itself to Italians. Nobody was forcing GM to giving up the manufacturing control over the whole line of produce. So now what you are saying is, I've made a mistake, but you're going to pay for it. This is not, and you know what is going to happen? as the result, and I'm pretty sure, you're going to have a second free trade zone, which will be constituted by Canada, China, Turkey, Europe, plus maybe on the food side, Argentina and Brazil. This is how it's going to happen. And now the question will be, and where will be US? Well, nobody cares.
What is the position of the Polish government on tariffs in the U.S. at this point?
Well, we are going to participate in not buying US products.
You're going to embargo
Yeah.
U.S. products.
Well, not embargo, but you're going to have the society will respond by saying we're not going to buy US products.
Poland, as the European Union member, is obligated by the one single market policies, right? So Poland can negotiate with the United States bilateral, in a sense, on this tariff. But basically, the position of Poland is the position of the European Union, because we kind of ceded the rights to individual negotiation when we joined the European Union, right? So it is the European Union policy that is going to, and the response is going to be toward the United States, not only Polish. Of course, from the perspective of the United States wants to kind of disband the European Union to have a bilateral agreements with each country, because, of course, it's easier for the U.S. with the economy to negotiate with Poland, which is,
yeah, but then again, this is 0.4 GDP. The Poland is not exporting anything, of the significance to U.S. The most of our export is in parts that are embedded in cars, in heavy machinery that is produced in Switzerland and in Germany. So, our real export goes directly there. So those duties are hitting more them, but by the ricochet is going to influence as well Polish government. But you have now the notion that society is saying, well, if the friend behaves like this, because remember as well, the Polish society was very pro-American, always. We have this almost love relations. And suddenly somebody is in a perceptional side betraying you. So saying, why we should do this? It's a very strange situation. Yeah.
I'm going to cut us off here.
Yeah.
We can continue the conversation, but I want to thank you very much.
My coffee.
And thank you, Olin, we pulled this together in a week and a half, I think. So thank you very much for coming. We have some presents here. I'm going to let Olin talk about his stuff. I have for you a candle from Prosperity Candle, which was made in East Hampton by refugees.
And Victor, I have for you a book on Polish heritage in the Connecticut River Valley or the Pioneer Valley that we co-authored. And then my favorite red baseball cap, Polish, American, and proud. The American flag on one side, the Polish flag on the other, and PolishCenter.net on the back.
Thank you very much.
So I encourage anybody who can to stay and continue the conversation, and please eat some of this food, which was donated by
Burnat's Deli.
Burnat's Deli.
Street in Chicopee.
So thank you very much.